There are reports that say that you have the lowest approval rating of any vice president.
Well, there are polls that also say I have great approval ratings.
Swing voters don't like Harris. How big a drag is Kamala Harris on the ticket?
She's a pretty big drag. I think she was arguably Biden's worst political decision.
They don't like her. There's lots of reasons they don't like her.
Kamala Harris's approval rating is now at 28%, which is an historic low for any modern vice president.
We're hearing it from mainstream media, one outlet after another, one leak after another. That Kamala Harris is the worst vice president ever, the worst politician ever.
We don't see the vice president. What people are saying to me, and I'm sure they're saying it to you, where's the vice president? Some White House officials are feeling that she came off looking unprepared for inevitable questions about when she might visit the southern border.
We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I mean, I don't understand the point that you're making.
The point that Lester Holt was making was obvious to anyone else who was watching this interview, which is that the issues at the border are inextricably linked with the portfolio that she's been given.
The border is secure. We have a secure border.
Bidenomics is working.
Prices have gone up. And families and individuals are dealing with the realities of that bread costs more, that gas costs more. And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up.
She won't just protect Plan B. She is Plan B. And for whatever reason, Harris has never been popular. You can count the number of delegates she won in the 2020 primaries on one hand, as long as that hand has no fingers.
Kamala Harris is Joe Biden's pick for president as he was forced to step down, and the media swings in the full propaganda mode, covering up her history and blatantly lying. I'm going to look at the lies as well as the facts. Hey guys, my name is Jason Wesley, and this is not a podcast.
So we're both Indian,
yes,
but actually we're both South Indian.
Yes, you look like the entire one half of my family.
Why did Joe Biden step down from running for president? It was because he was losing to Trump in the polls and his abysmal display at the debate June 27th.
With the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump.
Here's Joe Biden a week before he dropped out.
Is he going to stay in the race? Is he going to drop out? Here's my answer. I am running and we're going to win. I'm not going to change that. You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
Here's the media and Democrats claiming that he was fit as a fiddle.
This version of Biden is the best Biden ever.
She knows so long as he was denied.
In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been.
President Biden has a photographic memory. His understanding and mastery of a complicated geopolitical situation, remarkable.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
I was sitting, 2 feet from him across the table, and he was, intense.
Have trouble walking sometimes? Yeah, so did FDR. He wanted GD war.
But he's totally focused. He's very sharp.
They say he's sharp in meetings and so on.
Very lucid, very well informed. Biden is stately, and he comes with gravitas.
Ageism is an issue. Americans have a rich history of holding people's physical characteristics against them. Okay, you can ask African Americans.
He's older. That doesn't mean that he is unfit, and there's a lot of ageism there. More wild speculation from a bunch of people who have probably never been in a room with Joe Biden and certainly don't have medical degrees that I'm aware of.
Now, we all know that it was just lies. These leftists don't want you to believe your own eyes, your own ears, your own wallets, anything except what they tell you. Biden left feeling angry and betrayed by top Democratic leaders wavering on his campaign. The president is furious at how the party has tried to force him out, two sources say, as Democrats in Congress increasingly believe the question is when, not if, he will end his campaign. Now, there's been widespread dissent among Democrats for a while now, but no one would ever come out publicly and say it.
One Democratic senator who declined to speak publicly said, "The country saw what those of us who have had personal interactions with him have all known for the last 2.5 years.
So then he drops out of the race, and the Democrats claim that he's a selfless hero of the Republic by nominating Vice President Kamala Harris. But not all Democrats are on board with Kamala Harris. Even AOC spoke about the division on her social media.
If you think
that there is consensus among the people who want Joe Biden to leave, that they will support Vice President Harris, you would be mistaken. A lot of them are not just interested in removing the president. They are interested in removing the whole ticket.
Now, I'm not going to get into her sleeping with a married man, Willie Brown, in California, that admitted that he promoted her to positions of power, and how the DNC installed her as a senator after Barbara Boxer retired, and then installed her as the VP of Biden because of her sex and race, because you already know that already. But before I get into her actual policy positions, let's take a look at how the media swiveled into position to help clean up her history and lie to the American people, sometimes blatantly, sometimes by omission, by deleting evidence like Hillary Clinton, and other times by semantics. Here's the media lying blatantly about whether Kamala Harris was the border czar.
Vice President Harris was not a border czar.
Meantime, Vice President and border czar Kamala Harris facing some backlash.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
People are going to have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled her.
They were very critical of Kamala Harris, especially in her role as border czar.
Now what she's up against is folks lying about her border record, calling her a border czar.
Kamala Harris, who was appointed as the border czar.
The Biden team didn't declare her the border czar. They wanted her to work on kind of the root causes of immigration.
There has been so much criticism against Kamala Harris. You know, she was the border czar.
Calling her sort of the border czar, which wasn't necessarily the case.
So the border, if they weren't planning to address it in a major way, do not make her your border czar. She met with some of the Northern Triangle countries, but nothing has effectively changed.
Now here's Joe Biden in March of 2021 when he appointed her as the border czar.
This all starts at a White House meeting about immigration on March 24th, 2021. One of two announcements made by President Biden is assigning the handling of the border to Harris.
It's not her full responsibility and job, but she's leading the effort.
Now, many people may or may not know this, but Kamala was the second border czar. After 100 days on the job, Roberta Jacobson, President Joe Biden's first border czar, left the role on April 9th, 2021, after already grappling the large increases of migrants attempting to cross into the U.S. The LA Times reported saying Biden's border czar is stepping down. Before she did, Biden announced in a March 24, 2021 news conference that Harris would be responsible for addressing the southwest border surge that had already begun within days of him taking office. Now, instead of going to the U.S. border, by mid-2021, she goes to Guatemala and is met with Guatemalans telling her to go home.
Yamate says increased border crossings have been caused in part by the change of administrations in Washington.
Y el mensaje cambió a
The message changed too. We're going to reunite families, and we're going to reunite children. The very next day, the Coyotes were here organizing groups of children to take them to the United States.
She was asked at the time if she had ever gone to the border, and she says, "We've been to the border."
Why not visit the border? Why not see what Americans are seeing in this crisis?
Well, we are going to the border. We have to deal with what's happening at the border. There's no question about that.
You hear the semantics? Now, normally when you say we, it means that you and someone else. She tried to play the semantics game and then got defensive when she got called out.
Okay. Do you have any plans to visit the border?
At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe.
And so then after all the pressure from having the largest monthly crossings in 20 years at 180,034 in May, she finally visits El Paso, Texas at the end of June in 2021.
Senator Cornyn has criticized the vice president for not going to the Rio Grande Valley, which has seen far more migrants enter the country than in the El Paso sector. She answered him and other critics.
It is here in El Paso that the previous administration's child separation policy was unveiled. And so we've seen the disastrous effects of that right here in this region. It is here in El Paso that the return to Mexico policy from the previous administration was implemented.
Now, they say that she was supposed to get to the bottom of why people are migrating, and the reason that she claims is because of climate change.
Both the acute factors and the root causes of migration. First, the acute factors, the catastrophes that are causing people to leave right now. The hurricanes, the pandemic, the drought, and extreme food insecurity. The lack of climate adaptation and climate resilience.
I mean, she told the migrants not to come.
Do not come. Do not come.
But where did the Democrats get the exact same talking point to say at the exact same time? Well, here's a leaked White House memo that went over the talking point of border czar. Vice President Harris was never appointed border czar. There has never been such a position. It doesn't exist. Border czar, title invented by Republicans and press repeats, was not asked to lead on administration's immigration and border enforcement policies. Blah, 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 you get the point. But here's CNN going into full propaganda mode saying that Trump lied at a recent rally.
All right. Fact check away, Daniel.
So in those short clips, there were 3 separate false claims. He said that Vice President Harris has never visited the border. She did go. She went in mid-2021 in Texas. Many Republicans complained before that she had not gone. Then they stopped because she went, but Trump has continued 3 years later. He said she was Joe Biden's border czar. She wasn't. She was never put in charge of the border. She was given a much more limited assignment to lead a so-called root causes diplomatic effort trying to address the reasons in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras that people choose to migrate. Now, many Republicans scoff at this kind of fact check. They're like, there were a bunch of articles back in 2021 that called her border czar. Frankly, those articles were wrong. And if you look at CNN's own coverage, not to toot our own horn, but you'll see that the White House and Harris's office consistently, as early 21, pushed back on that framing.
I've already showed you the evidence of one lie that he just said. You heard him literally repeat the White House memo, if you paused it and read it, that we just went over. Here's what's wild about this. The so-called journalist in this clip is Breonna Keeler. You just heard Daniel Dale toot CNN's own horn at the coverage of pushing back against the border czar statement. Now let's look at a flashback of that same reporter, Breonna Keeler, speaking with Ed Lavandera back in 2021.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
It's not like we can't go back and get a copy of the footage. It's all recorded. I can show you them in their own words. Anyway, I'm going to show you an interview where Kamala was asked about being the most liberal senator.
You're considered the most liberal United States senator.
Somebody said that, and it actually was Mike Pence on the debate stage. But
yeah, well, actually, the nonpartisan GovTrack has rated you as the most liberal senator.
Well, wouldn't you know it? GovTrack removed it. And this is the excuse they put on their website. We retracted the legislative rankings that we published for 2013, 15, 17, and 19, including a ranking of then Senator Kamala Harris as the most liberal senator in 2019. A newer ranking that we published in 2021 says that she was the leftmost Democrat senator. Catch the difference? Right-wing media didn't like it. Again with the semantics game. She's not the most liberal senator now. She's the leftmost senator. But I know what you're thinking. What was Kamala's greatest achievement as VP?
What do you think has been her biggest accomplishment since she's been vice president?
Oh, I have to say, since the Dobbs opinion, first vice president in history to visit an abortion clinic. Go get them.
Anyways, if you want to know what Kamala stands for and what she supports, I'm going to play for you a clip in her own words.
Being an undocumented immigrant is not a crime.
I know what a crime looks like. An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal. An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal. An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal.
An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal.
I am prepared to get rid of the filibuster to pass a Green New Deal. There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
Would you ban offshore drilling?
Yes.
What is the solution for voters in the fossil fuel industry?
Giving the workers an ability to transition. We're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals. That's correct.
Raise your hand if you think it should be a civil offense rather than a crime to cross a border without documentation.
Abolish ICE. Yeah. Is that a position you agree with?
And we need to probably think about starting from scratch.
Outdated, it is wrong-headed thinking to think that the only way you're going to get communities to be safe is to put more police officers on the street.
Would you support changing the dietary guidelines?
Yes.
The food pyramid. What would people
yes.
to reduce red meat specifically?
Yes.
People who are convicted in prison, like the Boston Marathon bomber, on death row, people who are convicted of sexual assault, they should be able to vote?
I think we should have that conversation.
We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program.
So for people out there who like their insurance, well, they don't get to keep it?
Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
Will you be my alibi? Or I could blame it on